So again, Jacques Attali, winners and losers in the coming world order, the new world order, the age of Aquarius. And it makes me wonder, will I be a winner or a loser in this new world order? So this is from 1991. It's been a few years. And again, when we say futurist, generally that's oligarch speak, deep state speak for this is how we're through our dialectics are moving history forward. Again, our dialectics are Hegelian. Remember the esoteric Hegelian, Hegel the Hermetic, through the pitting of one philosophy against another, one ideology against another. We will move history in the desired direction, and the desired direction is biopolitical. It's about changing and transmuting man. So, what is Jacques' piece of this? Here we have on page 131, an elite typically controls the markets, the prices, and the products. The elite accumulates the profits, controls the salaries and the workers, finances, artists, and explorers. So he made his career as an economist. Now, when I talk economists, when people at the universities, they talk about a free market. Of course, this is made on assumptions that there's not coercion, there's not monopolies, there's free information. But that's already a leap of faith that your economics professor won't talk about because interconnected directorates, they're all monopolies, all but a little sectors that are left over in our economies. Our economy is so it's kind of funny to speak about free markets, but he's not beating around the bush here. It's an elite that control the prices, the product. Well, we thought what we wanted and am I saying that you can't throw an ad in Craigslist and sell your lawnmower? No, it's kind of like democracy. Here and there, it exists to some pockets. That's why it seems real enough. He's talking about what Lenin, not John Lennon, but Vladimir Lenin would say. He'd talk about the commanding heights of the international economy and those figures, often shadowy figures, that control prices and products. Because if you control what we can consume, what goes into our bodies, again, you're part and parcel of being someone that's transitioning the body into something else. The elite accumulates the profits, controls salaries, the workers. The elite defines the ideology and supports its power. Could that be more clear? Could it be more clear? The only question I have is, who are the elites? Well, I want to defer here to perhaps the most profound thinker on this subject, which would be, of course, Carroll Quigley from his seminal work, 1966, Tragedy and Hope. And he's going to say that it's the international bankers. Let's just cut to it, okay? It's the international bankers. They own the banks, then they control the resources, the oil, the petro, etc., and then the corporations. So, and he's going to go through the name of families. You can see him there, Warburgs and Rothschilds and Morgans. And yes, that's what he's saying it's all about. Did anybody ever come along and say, Quigley didn't know no, nobody ever said Quigley didn't know what he's talking about. At the universities, we just don't read him because it counters the narrative that they're teaching. So they just don't read him, don't talk about him. Maybe some of his other works that don't discuss this grand collusion of international bankers. These bankers came to be called international bankers. More particularly, we know them as merchant bankers in England, private bankers. We can talk about the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, which is the apex of this system, says Quigley, all the way down to each nation's federal reserve or equivalent bank. Of course, they're private. They have shareholders. They're, believe it or not in the business of helping out the treasury of each nation, but in maximizing their profits. So it's a handful of families. So, and then there's the French piece and so forth. So they are the international bankers. Can we get more specific? Who are the international bankers? Well, I tell you what, I'm going to go on this one to Dr. Henry Makow. If you want to kind of see his more alternative piece on this, he has an archive of the last 25 years looking specifically into who the international bankers are and their worldview and their religion. Um, but the takeaway I get and where I'm going, and this is consistent with Mako, is that there is one ruling oligarch. They rule all of the nations of the world. And I know you can go to different sources and different internet sites and they can talk about competing oligarchs. I don't see one. They existed in the ancient world. I believe that since the rise of the black nobility in the 8th and 9th century, there has been one dominant oligarch. And that's my position. It's also consistent with Webster Tarpley's position. So that's my position on this. I'm free to welcome anybody to figure out a system to identify anybody but one of these oligarchical systems. And how does it work? Well, in an alchemical fashion from the ancient world into the modern world, it's a mix of families through a system of their own in-house eugenics that decides this political leadership. And in the words of Mako, this oligarchy is a loose alliance of Jewish finance, British, American, European aristocracy joined by marriage, money, and an esoteric worldview. So that's what I've been getting at in the whole course. So I just kind of put it there. And so when people use the taglines for these different terms in the last many years that I've been doing this, I think this is the most succinct definition of who the international bankers are and what they're up to. They're intergenerational. They're an oligarchy. They're intergenerational. And what's interesting, they're fascinated, the aristocracy, with bloodlines and the eugenic formulation. And so what's interesting, if you notice Tarpley's definition about oligarchy, they do accept people from outside the oligarchy. It's sort of like they can get grafted in, and sometimes they're just as valuable. So bloodline is super important, but outsiders can be grafted in, especially if they contribute. And so that's why when we get into the idea of who decides what's going to be done to my body, ultimately who's going to decide if I live or die, is going to be based on that worldview. How does it work? From the apex in Basel, Switzerland, down to each and every Federal Reserve System that owns, as we said at the beginning, a deep state. Go back to those very first videos. All of the scholarship on the deep state, there's two nodes of power in every country. There's the political at the capital, and then there's the equivalent of a Wall Street or the financial sector. In each case, Wall Street or the financial sector of that country created the security mechanism, the military industrial complex, and the secret, the CIA, Mossad, that equivalent were created by Wall Street. And in a sense, the legitimate or visible government is a tool of Wall Street, the international bankers, the dominant oligarchical class who are a mixture of Jewish finance and the aristocracy of Europe and the Americas. They own vast interlocking cartels. That's the idea of interlocking, one monopolistic system. A lot of what we see is the free market. Get a burger over here, get a burger over there. You go up a little higher, it's the same company. Okay. Banking, oil, pharmaceuticals, war, chemicals, minerals, media, etc., and control society and government through corporations and professional groups. And I said at the beginning of this, I didn't want to be a limited hangout. I wanted to get to a place where whoever's following me, we're not chasing our tail. I didn't just pop this at the beginning. This video, we're in the 80s here before I got to this, okay? And this systematically was put together to get us here, okay? The media, education, secret societies Think tanks, foundations, and intelligence agencies. It's ultimately the control mechanism. And Foucault talked about this as well. And he said the mechanism somehow controls us. He was kind of vague, but then he kind of conceded, Foucault, that yes, the system does have operators, but he just kind of brushed it under the secrets of empire. Well, I'm kind of pulling down on the carpet and saying who's operating this system. From the black nobility until now, they created the institutions, they created the ideologies, they created the state system back in 1648. So they've been around. They don't need necessarily to infiltrate. They do that on occasion, but they created the system that has led us in, the Francis Bacon, the New Organum, the New Atlantis, that's leading us slowly, brick by brick, into the New World Order. A big turn was taken with the United Nations, UNESCO, the World Banking System, but we're about to take that final transition into the age of Aquarius. All the bricks are in place. Or we could think of a capstone. Think tanks, foundations to absorb the world's wealth. What's the goal? To absorb. And this is precisely what Quigley says. It's there to take all the power of governments and all the sovereignties of nations and individuals, which purportedly the United States was made to do with the Declaration of Independence, and put them into private hands, the hands of the master class. And they're going to create a new service, a new system. And how will things be different in this new system? Well, that's what I'm going to go to Jacques here with. And controls its citizens using propaganda, education, and social engineering. Well, I thought our entertainment was just to entertain us. I thought our schools were just to enlighten us. Well, not according to this worldview. Not once you open your eyes to the true governing power of this world, oligarchs. And their secret mode of control is Plato's cave. They control all of the information and see you as essentially a prisoner that needs to have some kind of minimal rights and is best if kept somewhat happy in your servitude, hence the bread and circus. Hope y'all are watching the Super Bowl and all of the ads there next week, because we deserve it. Jacques Attali, Winners and Losers in the Coming New World Order, 1991. So he's saying here the coming New World Order will be based on its ability to manage violence. Like who's getting violent? Everybody's just kind of in zombie mode right now. Who's gonna get violent? Jacques. Unlike previous orders, however, which first ruled by religion and then by military force, the New World Order in the age of Aquarius will manage violence largely by economic power. What does he mean by that? He's talking about some kind of new economic system then. Well, he's getting into a couple details right here. But before I get into the economic system and how he's kind of calling it some kind of collective intelligence, I want to get back to what collective intelligence is in this new system. But here's a few things he's writing back in 1991. The memory card will become the principal artificial limb of a person. So you go from your phone is here, your card is here, then you get the chip in the card, and now, gosh, pulling that card out of the wallet's it's a lot of work. So we want that chip somewhere that it's more convenient, where we won't have to find where the chip is. So we're kind of thinking of places we might put that chip, that mark. So at once an identity card, a checkbook, a telephone, a fax machine. And I imagine if you read this in 1991, internet was, I don't think I'd heard that word in 1991. It was probably a ways off. In sum, he's going to call this nomadic man, because you don't belong to a nation or a people, right? You're there to serve something else. So you don't want to have any identity tied to your lineage, anything that made Western culture what it is, those things. No, you have to have a new identity. So you're going to be nomadic. You're going to be deracitated, picked up by your roots from anything that you identified with, so you can be totally in service to the race, as Wells said, to the race, the master race. You're going to love it. It will be a kind of artificial self. Now, here's where we get into a little of the AI talk that we're here about today. There's yourself, kind of your legal personality, and then there's this other self. So this is where we're transitioning now, and he's alluding to the transmutation of sorts that's going to take place through artificial intelligence that he's identifying as a chip. To use it will only require plugging it into the global electronic networks. That's kind of what Brzezinski was talking about, of information and commerce, the oasis of new nomads. These networks will be easily accessible, homogeneous, and integrated as today's automated tellers whose service we use by simply inserting our bank cards into their slots. Such networks of the future will be located in banks and stores and public access. Okay, one day commands will be given simply by speaking. So I'm a little bit of a late adopter. I just got into that with my GPS, just hit the button and say where I want to go. So I think with that list right there, it's like 1991, check, 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 check. 2018. What do we have left here in 2018? Of course, The Economist predicted back in 1987 that this would be 2018 would be the year of the cryptocurrency or the bit currency or the international currency. So perhaps that will be introduced this year, and we'll figure as these information nomads how we're going to plug into this new system that Jacques is telling us about